Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and in this video I'm going to focus on Saturn. I'm going to do a deep dive into Saturn, and then I'm also going to talk about the next edition of that we just have available of our Saturn +8 throne talismans, and you can check out the link to that. When we start talking about Saturn, what I find is there's a lot of fear out there about Saturn. You know, it's kind of a boogeyman or whatever. People get really freaked out about him in any possible situation. It's always bad. And talk about the greater malefic. That sounds really bad. Now, a couple of points I want to make about this. First of all, all the planets have their negative side. And in fact, what we call the benefics, Venus and Jupiter, they can often be the biggest problem for us. Because if we think of like pleasure, which is what Venus and Jupiter bring us, pleasure is good, but there's an incredible tendency to overindulge, excessive pleasure, and you can just think of all the problems that are caused by that. And it's interesting, one of the things that we can see in the passage from medieval Renaissance astrology to modern astrology is a loss of a tremendous amount of technique. And one of the techniques that's really extremely useful in medieval Renaissance is to be looking at the essential dignity of the planets. And that's giving us a range, from sign, exaltation, triplicity, term, face. These are all dignities. Peregrine has no dignity or debility, and then we have a detriment or fall. Those are afflicted. This gives us a scale to be able to give us a sense of the strength, but also the nature of the planet in that particular chart. Is this positive? Is it negative? How negative is it? How positive is it? All this detail is provided in the medieval Renaissance. It's missing in modern. And so what happens is people end up focusing on certain planets as being good and certain planets as being negative no matter what. And while we can see that, Guido Bonatti, for example, is 146 aphorisms. He's like, even the malefics, if they're well dignified, said there can be positive. They can get done what they need to get done as significators. And if you have a planet like Venus or Jupiter, the fact that they're a benefic does not mean that if they're afflicted, that they're not going to be problematic for you. So again, like I said, afflicted Venus in Scorpio, for example, can be very problematic. This is like jealousy, excessive passion, love triangles, conflict, all that sort of thing. Not positive at all. Whereas, again, Saturn in Libra, his exaltation, or Saturn in his signs, Capricorn and Aquarius, can be very useful. And in fact, if you think about it, even in the broad sense of it, stern, disciplined Saturn, not so much fun in the short term, but can be very beneficial in the long term. So again, yeah, Venus. Afflicted Venus, it's fun while it lasts, and then the next day with a hangover, wake up in jail or whatever, then you can see the problems of over excess. So a lot of what I like to do about the planets is to think of them in terms of as persons, as personalities, and we can learn about them, their personalities, in a lot of different ways. One of the most useful ways to look at is rulerships, planetary rulerships, and you can see a link there on the page to planetary rulerships. And this gives an incredible amount of detail of the things that are ruled by the planets, that the qualities of planets are involved in, and that gives you a sense of what they're like as a person. Another way to get a sense of them as a personality is to look at the invocations of the planets. In Picatrix, Book 3, Chapter 7 has the Huronian Sabian invocations of the planets. Very interesting. And so let's just take a look at Saturn. It says, it starts, "O exalted Lord, whose name is great and spans above the heavens of every other planet." Now this comes from the fact that in the geocentric astronomy that we use for medieval Renaissance astrology, the Saturn has the highest sphere, the seventh sphere. It's above all the other planets. It's the furthest away. He's the slowest, but also the most powerful in the sense of being the highest. And it says of Saturn, whom God has made subtle and exalted. It says, "You are the Lord Saturn, who's cold and dry." That's his elemental nature. Shadowy, the author of good, faithful in your friendships, true to your word, durable and persevering in your loves and hatreds, whose knowledge reaches far and deep. Truthful in your words and promises, single in your operations, solitary, remote from others, near to suffering and sorrow, far from joy and celebration. You are old, ancient, wise. You abolish knowledge of good things. You're author of good and evil. And he says, "Miserable and tormented is he who is made unfortunate by your unfortunes, and fortunate indeed is he who is touched by your fortunes." So right off the bat, even if we're looking at the negative qualities of Saturn, this is definitely a planet that you'd like to be on the good side of, right? You want to avoid getting the negatives, And just from that standpoint, you want to be dealing with Saturn in a positive way and be able to focus on, avoiding the negatives. But there's some incredible treasures that are to be found with Saturn. And if you just run from Saturn, if you're freaked out, then you're not going to be able to access them. You're not going to be able to work with them. And they're extremely important, particularly important for somebody who's working in the esoteric fields like an astrologer or the mage. Along with Mercury, Saturn is the ruler of astrology and magic, and he rules the deeper and more esoteric sides of these arts. So Picatrix says that Saturn rules profound sciences, the science of laws and seeking out the causes and roots of things and their effects, and speaking of miracles and understanding deep and secret qualities. And this really is what the mage does. The mage has, through their knowledge, through their experience, has mastered these interconnections of things in reality, the occult virtues, for example, understands how things work, and understands how to work with them, and understands the nature of reality, but also understands how to actually bring things about. So this is not just a theoretical knowledge. This is not some sort of philosophy professor or something like that. This is somebody who knows how things work and knows how to act within them. And so extremely, useful, like I said. Obviously, if you're going to be working in the esoteric fields, you're really going to want to bring Saturn into your astrological practice. Another interesting thing that's associated with Saturn, again, as you mentioned, he's cold and dry. It's extremely cold and dry. It's like winter. It's so cold it freezes you and dries you out. That's associated with the quality of melancholy. And Marsilio Ficino, who's a Renaissance philosopher, translator of the Corpus Hermeticum, astrological magician, and priest, he associated melancholy with genius. He was one of the first to start to say, this is the humor, this is the quality that is most associated with genius. This is far from the masses, it's solitary, but that's what's necessary to have that true wisdom and true spiritual approach. And Ficino had Saturn rising in Aquarius, just like I do, and he really reaped a tremendous benefit from that placement. It really, and I think I do as well. So it's interesting. Saturn is dignified by sign in both Aquarius and Capricorn, and exalted in Libra. And, he's got the essential dignity, like I said, +5 by sign. But, if we look further at it, the quality of these signs is kind of interesting with Saturn in them. Saturn, I said, cold and dry. Capricorn is also cold and dry. So Capricorn tends to intensify that cold and dryness. Whereas Aquarius and Libra are air signs, they're hot and wet. And so Saturn in Aquarius and Libra is tempered and balanced by those. So those are really great placements for Saturn. I mean, and again, this is why Saturn, I believe, enjoys in Aquarius traditionally, is because Aquarius has got that balancing. And so Aquarius to me is really a fascinating sign. It's very traditional and very avant-garde at the same time. It's interesting how people that are Aquarian have this tremendous knowledge of history, have a sense of rooted connection, but at the same time they're out there, say revolutionaries or whatever, or reformers. And really what's interesting about it is a fixed sign. It can be very, very stubborn. And they really have to, if you're strongly expressing Aquarius, I mean, this is whether you're Sun Aquarius or not. You may not strongly express Aquarius, even if you're Sun Aquarius. But somebody's got a lot of Aquarius in their chart. They really have to go their own way. And what I really prize about Aquarius is this ability to see the underlying nature of reality. And I think that's that combination of Saturn and Aquarius. It's giving you this big picture view, how everything fits together in detail, but also really in the broad sweep of things. So there's a very intuitive quality to it. So it's not just a syllogistic logic of A plus B equals C. It's like A to Z, be able to make these intuitive leaps and really able to access this deep wisdom, I think is a very typical quality of Saturn and Aquarius. So as I was saying, Saturn in Aquarius really is the very powerful and the deepest of the deep. Now I have this inherently, but a Saturn in Aquarius talisman is an excellent way of interacting with Saturn. It really, and sometimes it is most positive, particularly if you're, like I said, interested in this esoteric arts, wisdom, and improving your knowledge and your practice of astrology and magic. So Saturn is left Aquarius. You're not going to be able to make any more talismans. I mean, if you were trying to make one for yourself, you'd be out of luck. Saturn moves through the zodiac so slowly, goes through the zodiac in about 39 years. He's not going to go into Libra until 2039. So that means is a 15-year wait before you're going to be able to make talismans that are equally powerful to these Saturn and Aquarius talismans. So let me talk a little bit about the Saturn and Aquarius talismans that we've got a new edition available, and again, you can check these out on the website. You can see the link. This classic Picatrix image says the image of Saturn according to the opinion of the sage Picatrix. So Picatrix is quoting Picatrix, kind of paradoxical. It says the form of a man with the face of a crow. Let me just show you the image. This is the image that Nigel Jackson created for this. So it's the form of a man with the face of a crow, feet of a camel, sitting on a throne. In his right hand he has a scythe, and in his left hand he has a spear. So really evocative, resonant Saturn image, really getting across a lot of those sort of qualities. It kind of encapsulates Saturn. Pictures worth 1,000 words, so to speak, I think is really true, very evocative. Really, one of my favorite Saturn images. And then you can see the bronze talismans as well, as I said. So these are Saturn +8, dignified by sign and triplicity. Very powerful. Definitely you should consider working with Saturn, but you also want to be thinking about how Saturn is in your natal chart in terms of how you're reacting to Saturn. So Saturn in Aquarius, Capricorn, or Libra, these are a great choice so long as Saturn's not retrograde. Saturn retrograde is a yellow flag, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But so let's just start with that. Saturn in Aquarius, Capricorn, or Libra, great as long as it's not retrograde. Saturn in Leo, Cancer, and Aries, again, that's a yellow flag for Saturn. Saturn in any other sign other than those are fine, so long as it's not retrograde. And Saturn combust with dignity is fine. So people are going to get a little bit worried about this. I mean, this is kind of complicated. I would say that this is my methodology, and I would not put that out there saying this is the only way to prescribe talismans based on the natal chart, or that even have to prescribe talismans based on the natal chart. The other thing I would say about it is you don't want to get freaked out about it. It's like if you have Saturn in Aquarius retrograde, like, oh no, Saturn's bad for me. What you want to do with any of these yellow flags is to go ahead and do some divination, okay? Or with a specific talisman, that's really helpful too, is find and narrow down your choice. Because if you have a planet that's afflicted your natal chart, it doesn't mean 100% it's going to be bad for you. You don't even have to run screaming from it. What it's saying to you is you need to do a little bit more investigation. In divination, I typically do I Ching, you can do tarot, you can do pendulum, things like that. Also, if you are serious about getting a Renaissance astrology talisman, you can email me, and you can see the link there for that, with your date of birth, and I'll take a look at it. And then I can also do, again, a quick I Ching for you to see about compatibility with yellow flagged, caution stuff. So I mean, I've had plenty of people that had a planet afflicted in the natal chart and did very well with the planets of that talisman, the talismans of that planet. And it's just something to look at and think about. And again, the divination does the final seal of approval or disapproval on whether it's a good talisman or not. But definitely worth checking out. And again, it's useful to look at this in advance. If you want me to check a talisman, please do that before you order. So please do not order and then turn around and say, oh, would you please check for me? That causes all sorts of trouble. But I'm happy to do it if you're serious about getting a talisman. I think really, as I look at these Saturn talismans, but also just Saturn in general, it's really important to dispel that fear of Saturn in all circumstances. And definitely it may be that Saturn is really not compatible with you. I mean, it can be hard to take. Like I said, the solitariness, the certain tinge of melancholy that comes with it. But the benefits are incredible. Like I said, if you're somebody who is serious about being an astrologer, serious about a mage, or serious about your spiritual practice, you definitely want to at least consider working with Saturn. And these Saturn talismans are an excellent high-intensity way of interacting with, like I said, the most positive qualities of Saturn. Now, if Saturn is something that's not compatible, you're not going to work with them in a high-intensity way, you can still do planetary charity, for example, and you can see a link for that, and also the daily planetary practice, because these are low-intensity practices. But you don't want to fall into the mistake of, grabbing onto Venus and Jupiter is always good, and rejecting Saturn and Mars is always bad. It very much depends on what you're trying to do. It very much depends on the state and interaction of those planets. And so that's, again, the nuance of medieval Renaissance astrology that comes in. But I definitely, as a votary of Saturn, as somebody who's got Saturn in Aquarius rising, and feel like I've got tremendous benefits from that, I really want to get the word out, of the positive nature of Saturn. It's a planet that is very prominent in my chart, very important, in my both my professional and spiritual growth. And so check out the Saturn in Aquarius throne plus 8 talismans, all our Saturn talismans, and then also all the links that are provided. So like I said, very useful. Think about Saturn positively today. Think about the advantages of Saturn, and you're going to reap, I think, great benefits just as I have.